Okay, we are live. Sorry for being a couple minutes late, everybody. It is Friday. You are listening to Alumless. Thank you so much for tuning in. Here on the show, we talk about alumni engagement strategies and educational advancement. I am Ryan Catherwood, and the man that you see sitting right next to me is the one and only Mr. Chris Marshall, the LeBron James of alumni engagement. It's great to see you this week, sir. We are live today, Friday, January 20th, 2023, our first live show in 2023. So please be sure to say hello in the comments section of the LinkedIn event. We can see those comments and chime back while we're on the air. And we try to tackle your questions while we're live on the air. But if we run out of time, we always try to make sure to spend time on those questions in our bonus section that we have on the podcast edition of the show. I'm excited to be broadcasting for the first time personally in a remote scenario. It had some technical difficulties. It's always good to have those when you're not at your home desk, but we got it sorted out. I am in the Alumni Center at NC State University, which is really beautiful. There was just a ACC SEC annual giving conference here, which hosted by Adam Compton, Rashenda Mahone, and the great team here at NC State. So it's good to be live, and I'm in the boss's office, which is good. How are you, Chris?
I'm doing good. You're in the big boss's office, and I would argue in one of the, if not the nicest alumni center I've ever been in.
Yeah, so, yeah. I mean, it is stunningly gorgeous, and there's this beautiful Marriott hotel steps away.
Exactly right.
So I've not seen a sort of a more fantastic scenario.
Perfect scenario,
and alumni setup.
Let's let people in the chat or in the comments later on tell us whether their alumni center is better. But I'm going to put it out there. It's the best alumni center I've ever been in, NC State. So let's hear it. Josh, I see you're on there, and yes, I am a bit shorter than LeBron. You're right about that.
But just as talented in their respective professions. Yes,
I appreciate it, but let me be the Michael Jordan. The LeBron is our guest today. The future.
Okay, I like that. Yeah. Actually, Patrick Auerbach, who we're going to bring out shortly, is our guest today. University of Southern California. He's up nice and early on the West Coast to be with us today, and we're glad to have him. But it's good to see you, Chris. Our first live show of the year. It's been an exciting time for CMAC over the last few weeks. We welcomed Cynthia Koo Robinson to the team last week, and we just signed up partnership agreements with some new clients and other cool new things. We did a client call with our partners at Washburn and Goldrick, and we had a great turnout of alumni professionals who were interested in having an ongoing conversation. So your pick, Chris, which awesome thing would you like to add color commentary for?
All of the above. Cynthia's great. If you get a chance to work with her, for one. The client call we did with the Washburn team, we had 29 people on. It was too many. It was a good problem to have. But my highlight when you're a business owner is 4 new clients to the decks. It's always a highlight for me. We're very excited about our new partners and some really cool projects coming up. We'll get a chance to talk about later on in our podcast. We have some really cool things that are different than anything I've ever done in my 9 years of consulting work. So look forward to sharing some of those details.
Yeah. Well, I'm here at the NC State, the annual giving conference, and a lot of the conference has been about topics, of course, of annual giving, and the discussion has been on particularly lots of different areas, but on the processes of gathering and using data on alumni and donor affinities. And annual giving teams are trying to keep inching closer through new techniques and technology to optimize personalization in their marketing strategies and journey mapping strategies. How do you see this area of engagement impacting some of these other categories, like experiential volunteer communications?
I think personalization is going to be the word for our next several years in our industry, and demonstrating that we know our alumni, whether we're asking them for money in an annual giving context, or we're asking them to read a newsletter or come back to an event or volunteer for something to help us move something forward. It's going to be whether or not we're asking them to do something that has meaning to them, the value added to them and their lives. I always use my example is, if my alma mater, Lehigh, which is a great alumni program, I worked for them for years, but if they asked me to go to a class event or my college or my major or anything else, I would say no. Or I wouldn't even open the envelope or click on the email, to be honest with you. But but my affinity is swimming. And I coached there for years. I was a competitive swimmer. And if they asked me to come to an event, read a newsletter or make a gift or any of the above, I would help not only do all those things, I'd probably help plan those things. So being personal in what we do and knowing the alums and where they're going to have the impact that has some meaning to them. And it used to be enough that, the old history, tradition, and nostalgia was enough reason for decades for alums to give back in any way. And I think those still exist, but I still think we need to be more than ever, personalized and targeted in the way we communicate and ask people to show up and do whatever we want them to be doing.
Yeah. Well, we have a great guest today to talk about these topics and more. Let's bring out our special guest, Patrick Auerbach, who's a super accomplished engagement professional leading one of the premier programs in the country at the University of Southern California. Our friend Patrick here is the Associate Senior Vice President for Alumni Relations. Patrick, it's great to see you and welcome.
Good morning, gentlemen. It's great to be here. And I don't know if I'm the LeBron James of Alumni Relations. I'm thinking more like, because it's USC, I would like to, think I'm Caleb Williams, but, Heisman Trophy winner, or Lisa Leslie, women's basketball great, or even Allison Felix, because Allison, is the winningest track athlete in U.S. Olympic history. She's a Trojan, but she never actually competed as an athlete at USC, and neither did I. So pick your poison. But thank you. It's an honor to be with you, gentlemen, and with everybody here on this show today.
Yeah, well, I have to admit, Patrick, I picked the basketball analogy for a reason, just because your really interesting career dates all the way back to doing a really cool athletics operations work for folks like Pat Summitt at the University of Tennessee women's program. And you kind of came up into our space through athletics. And so I know that we're going to talk a little bit more about that, but I know.
Yeah, that's the Lisa Leslie reference, because she's one of the all-time women's basketball greats, or Cheryl Miller, if you will, Cynthia Cooper, you name it. We've got them all here.
All right, we got enough plugs. We know USC's amazing. All right, stop.
Okay.
Right?
Point taken.
No, keep bringing it. It's great. I love it.
Yeah, well, Patrick, we wanted to frame today's show around making alumni engagement more accessible. And to me, it seems like the idea of building programs, events, experiences in our communications so that they allow alumni to participate around affinity or identity-based alignments is all about access and inclusivity. I know you've made a lot of changes to your programs there at USC. How do you think about the challenge of engaging around affinities?
Thank you. Well, it harkens back to something Chris just said about personalization. And I think that however you're going to engage your constituents, if you're looking for general engagement or you want to advance relationships philanthropically or to build more advocacy or reputation for your institution, you want to be able to speak to a continuing an audience that's continuing to diversify, not only in perhaps their backgrounds, where they're from, how they attain their education, but also how they want to be engaged. So there's a lot of diversity on that line as well. So when you look at affinities, you want to see how do people want to be engaged. And when Chris made the comment, which I think is really apropos about traditions, people are looking to build new traditions. So the big threat we have now to kind of put this, I think we could really look at this is how do you keep the traditional folks, if you will, engaged and feeling included while you're trying to expand, you're trying to expand the tent and let everybody feel like they are welcome. And that's a huge lift, I think, for all of us, whether you're at an institution like USC. By the way, we have a wonderful alumni center as well. And I'm not to do too much branding here, but I'm a Bonvoy, loyalist. So I'm kind of envious of NC State having the Marriott right nearby. But how do you keep people all feeling included? And I think that there's some tension there because, our institutions aren't the same places they were 50 years ago. Yet they are. So I think that that's a grand challenge for all of us who are in the alumni and development space, is making everybody feel like they have a stake in the affairs and the benevolence of the institution.
But Patrick, you referenced it in that it is an industry-wide thing. I don't think it's just large universities.
Not at all.
With this issue. I mean, I have clients in liberal arts schools with 30,000 alums that have great traditional alumni programs, but they're wondering what the heck they're going to do now to build that more contemporary model with their more recent graduates, with the resources they currently have. What do you stop doing? All those things. And we're going to talk about a good example that you went through at USC in a little bit here. So
absolutely.
Yeah.
So yeah, lots of exciting stuff out there for sure. We could talk all day, but I know we have limited time. So I will defer back to you, Ryan.
Well, to sort of follow up on what Chris was mentioning and what you sort of brought up is making changes, right, to programs that are going to fit the trajectory moving forward into the future. And one of the changes you made was to pivot from a regional chapter group-based model to another model designed around affinity and identity. And you've been able to develop a model that is more inclusive, right? And what have been some of the ramifications of updating your program from that chapter-based model to this new approach?
Well, thank you for asking. It certainly was an attention grabber, and it's the gift that keeps on giving in a lot of ways. I think that by and large, it's been very successful, but I'll be the first to admit, I'll throw another celebrity name in here. I'm not ready to do the Michael Jackson victory tour yet because we still have a lot of work to do, and we haven't perfected. We have not perfected this, but I think we're onto something really important. And I mean, it might be a seminal moment in alumni relations. The way alumni associations have been organized for many, many years, especially when communications were not as sophisticated and connectivity is not as sophisticated as it is today, is to have a club model or an organization or a little group model based on locality. And I know we're going to get into this a little later with the Alumni Association here at USC with our upcoming centennial. But when I look at when our Alumni Association was founded 99 and a half years ago, it was founded on a bunch of clusters of communities. So that's how these organizations were founded. It was organic, and then it really needed some organization, and so you evolve. We did not take this lightly because we know that it's a given, and it's really in the zeitgeist, if you will, of alumni relations. If you don't live in the city in which your university or your college exists, where's your local club or your local chapter? That's just something that is such a natural tendency, and we respect that. But largely, we find that model was really antiquated. And I still crystally clearly remember when our former university president asked me, hey, you just took me on this wonderful tour, 11 cities across the United States. And in every single city, I got up in front of 400, 500, 600 people, and I wanted to acknowledge our alumni club. And every time I did, less than a dozen people stood up. When I said, how many of you are here from the club tonight? He said, what's wrong? And I said, nothing's wrong. I said, but there's a better way to do it right. And then that comment alone, it obviously resonated with me, but I didn't base a decision, on that piece of data alone. I started really observing what my staff was doing and what our volunteers were doing. And what we found largely was that we were spending more time putting out fires and trying to run defense. Let's put some sports back in this, instead of being on offense. We were doing too much defense that we weren't converting into points, if you want to use some football reference. We were not getting any takeaways. We were not getting any pick sixes or scoop and scores for the football
You've
folks.
done this before, yeah.
Right. But what was happening was we were spending too much time on defense, and we found that we didn't have the ball enough. And so, in other words, what we weren't doing was scoring points in terms of engagement. We were spending too much time trying to prevent problems and perhaps protect the name and brand of the university. And I don't believe for a moment that the alumni who were involved in the clubs were doing anything out of malice or malevolence. Not at all. However, there was a disconnect between what we needed our alumni communities to be doing in terms of being aligned with the university and what the model was actually allowing, or the expectations that were being put out there were just really, again, it was a mismatch. And when you have finite resources, yes, even at a big brand university like USC, we have to be really smart with our resources and make sure that we're putting them towards getting the biggest bang for our buck. We were finding we were spending way too much time and not getting enough return. Therefore, we started looking at what could we do instead. And this was about a 3.5-year process.
Which is amazing, Patrick. And we've talked about this over the course of the last few years, and every few months, I was like, I want to talk to Patrick because he's doing this thing, and I want to know how it's been going. So to that end, as you've learned a lot, right, over the last 3.5 years,
and I continue to,
and you will continue because you're not done yet, right? You acknowledge you're sort of still working on it.
Sure.
What would you advise other alumni engagement leaders, sort of thinking about their regional chapter model being a bit antiquated and, wanting to head in the same direction that you did at USC, or that you are going at USC?
Yeah, I mean, you could use some of the fun phrases, buyer beware. I think what's really important to know is we don't regret the decision. It might not be the best decision for every institution, but I tell you, especially with this kind of, this earth-shaking announcement last summer that we were switching conferences to the Big Ten, from the Pac-12, where we've been for almost 100 years. 4 Big Ten institutions reached out to us because we've, about what we did, because it was well known throughout the ranks, especially maybe the Tier 1 research universities and Power 5 football schools. USC made a very big change in its alumni engagement strategy. And we did so because, again, we felt that most of our alums, that the club or chapter model was not serving the broader alumni base. And again, I could get into some real granular statistics with you about how less than 2.5% of all of our alums in our regions ever engaged with our clubs. Yeah. But they also were some of the most vocal and passionate. So you want to make sure that you're trying to figure out where can we thread that needle and feel like we're being, available and we're being inclusive, that we're resonating with people. One of the biggest narratives we heard out there was, oh, I'm not part of the club. Well, if we're bringing a university president or we're doing something big and wonderful in a region and we invite you under the banner of the alumni club, people automatically think it's not for them because they were never active in the club. So we're trying to bring it forward as a university program or an alumni association program. And quite frankly, we are a non-dues model, meaning everyone is a member as long as you graduate. You do have to have a degree. You're automatically a member. I would estimate that at least half of our 468,000 alumni around the world don't even realize, quite honestly, that they are automatically members of the Alumni Association. So we even have to look at ourselves and say, wait a minute, if we put the club model to the side and still say, well, we're an alumni association, we still might have some of that barrier out there about how some alums might not even know that they're members. So it's a very, very tricky space where we do everything. Of course, we send out emails. We have all kinds of initiatives and campaigns to let people know, yes, you're a member. But there's still a very, very deep-seated cultural perception that clubs are the way you engage in the regions, and you have to, quote unquote, pay to join your alumni association. And those are much bigger than USC. Those, I think, are across our entire space. Yeah. So those are battles, and they're challenges. They're not negative. They're challenges that we're continuing to try to address so that we could, again, make all alums, going back to what you said, Ryan, access, inclusive. You are part of our alumni association, or you're part of our alumni. You're part of our, we'd say, Trojan family, very near and dear to our hearts to use that moniker. That's what we do. And so we want to make sure that people feel that they are part of it, that they are welcome, and that they're an important part of who we are.
So let me jump in here, Ryan, real quick, because I'm familiar a little bit of the journey that Patrick went through on this, and I want you to share on a certain spot here. So 3.5 years you mentioned, and I did follow you and I talked throughout as you went through this process. The fact that you had the chutzpah to even do this in the first place, I think was amazing. But when let me give an example. So you have that loud and vocal alum, well-known person who's out there who wants to keep things the same and not have any change come their way. Throw in the fact that person might be a high-level donor and has influence and access to other people. You did a lot of work, consensus building around this decision, so that when you went out with it, you had the backing of everybody all the way up through the president to the board of trustees, is my understanding. Is that?
Thank you. That is correct. And yes, we did have to do, obviously, it would have been a professional suicide to do otherwise. Exactly. But even if so, no matter how much you prep people for it, I think what was really surprising was the backlash. There was absolutely backlash. But I think there was also a lot of misunderstanding. I think people, again, it goes back to what we were talking about a few moments ago. When people heard that we were no longer going to have regional clubs, what we announced was we are moving away from regional clubs. And what they heard was we are no longer engaging alumni in the regions. And that is not what we said. Totally different. So again, it's how do you communicate? How do you clearly, first of all, get your internal ducks in a row? And thank you for bringing that up. Absolutely. You want to make sure, we were concerned about the lack of alignment between alumni clubs and the university. So we need to make sure that we are completely aligned in what we're doing and why and how, and that the right stakeholders internally and externally are aware, so that when you actually make the move, all kinds of misperceptions out there, you want to be able to, again, this is where you want to be able to run defense, but then go on offense with it. Yeah. And I think what was compounding the issue was the fact that we were fresh into the pandemic. And so people, I think, were really struggling, in their personal lives, their professional lives. We were all isolated. We're social creatures, especially those of us in the alumni and development world. Yeah. We are engaging folks. And so I think people on the outside really felt like something big was taken away from them. All that to say, if I could have done something differently, one of the biggest criticisms we had was from some of our former club and chapter leaders who said we didn't engage them in the conversation. And where we really had to be blunt and frank, and this was tough, was you weren't even signing your charters and following the rules. So they weren't really engaging in a trusting relationship. Now, not all of them, by the way. I want to say that it was a very large minority. It was about 40 to 45% of our clubs were out of compliance. So again, that illustrates we were spending way too much time trying to get people in compliance with anything from, scholarship accounting, proper use of the brand, getting permission to, when you wanted to create t-shirts or do branding. Like, we were spending way too much time always trying to put out those fires. The same people who refused to sign the charters were the people who wanted us to engage with them in making the decision.
That's right.
And it wasn't, I mean, I don't want to think I'm like the Sue Sylvester, if you will, for those of you who watch Glee, this antagonist cheerleading coach, because I was a cheerleader in undergrad.
Cornell grad, by the way, your coach.
What's that?
She's Cornell grad, the actress. Keep going.
Yeah, exactly. Oh, thank you. And I was a UCLA undergrad. So all kinds of conflict going on here. But I wanted to make sure that people understood that, like, we were doing all of this for the grand reason of promoting and enhancing and advancing USC.
Yeah,
that's the thing. But again, people were very, I will say, and in all due respect, people were really traumatized by this change. Granted, it wasn't a lot of people, but they were vocal. We understood, and a lot of them have come around. Not all of them have, and some of them never will.
Yeah,
and we understand that. But you know what? It's funny because some of the criticisms that have come out said that the Alumni Association has always been this way. I don't think there's an alumni director out there who is 100% loved by their audience. I learned what it's like now. Now I got a taste of what it's like to be an athletic director, because there were all kinds of campaigns about get this guy out of here. I'm really a Bruin, because it's my undergrad. I heard it all. But the proof has been in the pudding. Our volunteerism in the regions has nearly doubled. And people don't want to hear that. We have the data, we have the proof. And it's because, Ryan, going back to the theme of this conversation, people feel included now. You want to host a community service project in your region? You're no longer first told by the club board, well, you're not on the board of the club, and you have to first join the club and be one of us before you can participate in an alumni association program. We have removed that barrier. So it's created lots of opportunities, but it also now puts more of not a burden, but a duty and a responsibility on my staff to make sure that we are deftly managing our volunteers. And so again, it's great work, but we feel like the hard work we're putting in is yielding more results than before.
Yeah. Patrick, we wanted to, we teased the idea of the centennial celebration for the USC Alumni Association, which we talked before, a really exciting opportunity there. I wanted to make sure that here in the live show, we talk a little bit about that before we switch over to the bonus segment with you, which everyone is going to want.
And that's going to be live cast on ESPN News as well, right?
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Okay, just want to make sure that feed is up and running. Just kidding.
Lester Holt, NBC Nightly News, is going to cover it tonight. We can watch
Okay.
Well, so what are the plans that are in the works for sort of taking advantage of this great opportunity, celebrating the centennial of the Alumni Association there at USC? And what are you thinking about in terms of sort of important milestones that and then opportunities, right, to bring alumni more in the fold?
The first word that comes up is opportunity. I mean, so the fact is on June 21st, which is the summer solstice, June 21st of 2023, the USC Alumni Association will turn 100. And it's an important distinction. I don't want people to think it's the University of Southern California centennial, because in fact, USC is over 140 years old. But our Alumni Association was founded in 1923, which was also the year in which the Los Angeles Memorial Coliseum was built, or opened, I should say. It's also the year that Fight On, which is our battle cry, the Fight On USC song was created in 1923. The Caruso Catholic Center here at USC, interestingly, its predecessor, its forerunner, was founded in 1923. The Hollywood sign, the world famous iconographic, landmark, was erected in 1923. So lots of 1923 going on. But we want to use this centennial as an opportunity to celebrate a century of the Trojan family, a century of volunteerism and advocacy, and also as an opportunity to promote the next century of alumni engagement at USC. What we're not going to do, which it's tempting, well, it's 100 years, let's put on 100 events. We already do many, many, many things across many different platforms, whether it's events, whether it's, programs and panels online, whether it's communications initiatives. So we're not going to add anything. Well, maybe we'll add one or two things. By and large, we're not going to add anything. What we're going to do is take everything we already do and kind of hit the pause button for a year and do an entire year of centennial messaging and programming in those already established platforms. So our 100th homecoming happens to be this fall, and that's anchored to a football game. We have an annual volunteer recognition dinner in which we usually, have about 15 or 20 high-level volunteers who we recognize. Instead of doing that, we're going to actually celebrate all of our volunteers and do celebrating a century of volunteerism. And instead of getting 400 people in a ballroom, we're probably going to have 1,000 people in an outdoor venue on campus. So again, we're kind of going to take a little pause from the usual run-of-the-mill things, which are wonderful and fun, and do something totally different, have this huge brand. We've already been working on we already have some graphics and messaging that's been approved, and we're excited to unveil it. But we're not going to add a whole bunch of new events. We're just going to try to use the centennial messaging to promote our programs to new people and use our programs to promote the centennial messaging. So kind of a reflexive strategy there. And again, we're hoping that it yields great results. We want to attract new alums, whether they graduated last year or, last century, it doesn't matter. And we want to obviously promote the spirit of philanthropy at USC and, work hand in glove with our annual fund office, which does not report into me, but we want to make sure that we're not missing an opportunity to really celebrate the Trojan family. That's what it's all about, and building engagement. We have a committee of 30 members. It spans 8 different decades. So we have people who graduated from USC in the 50s, 60s, 70s, 80s, 90s, 2000, 2010, and we even have an alum of 2020. This is an advisory committee. There are former alumni club leaders on this advisory committee. Really important. They still have a voice. Of course, they're the ones who signed the charters and the contracts, but these are people who, we have people on 3 different continents. We have people from all our different multicultural communities, different academic disciplines. It's a beautifully representative committee of 30 that's representing a Trojan family of more than 468,000. So to have them as the face of this centennial as well is just, I can't tell you how exciting it is.
It sounds fantastic. It sounds like a heck of an initiative. Chris, just sort of in the last couple of moments of, the live show here, I was curious, the consulting work that you've done and the connectivity with these types of centennial celebrations, how do you sort of see overall impact on these types of opportunities and their connectivity with engagement more broadly?
Yeah, I think, where I've seen these work around 100ths and 50ths and 75ths and 25ths, you see a lot of 50ths right now in the Northeast where you have schools that went co-ed, for example, back in the early 70s. And a lot of them are leveraging those moments. And there are absolutely times you should, there's no other chance you have other than those moments to leverage that and to do what Patrick gives the perfect example of how to do it. But I also see it coming around, some of the most successful events I've been a part of personally is when a faculty member who's been the iconic 40-year member of the faculty retires. And that person's departure is a moment where you can celebrate, just like you would an anniversary date. So I'm seeing more of this. I'm seeing some folks in the chat. Someone put in "fight on," Patrick. There, that was for you.
Thank you.
So Ryan, the short answer is yes. We got to leverage these moments. I think they're exactly what Patrick talked about in terms of bringing in a real inclusive, diverse group to help you think about and celebrate it and leverage them. Leverage them all you can is the way I would recommend for anyone.
Yeah. I would say, if I may, real quick, the passion and the care and the love that these alums have for the institution is unsurpassed. And I mean, it's so funny. So we said this advisory committee was going to meet 4 times. So they've already met twice in the fall semester. Their upcoming meeting, it's coming up on, and we actually did the next one on a Saturday because people are flying in for this meeting. We're going to do the big photo on campus, going to take them to dinner and a men's basketball game that night. Cool. They are so passionate about this, and it's really awakened and renewed a spirit of togetherness. And we actually had to convert this meeting on February 4th from a meeting into a day-long retreat because we keep running out of time. Every time the committee meets, and as much as my staff is wonderful, and as much as we can all be pretty much like drill sergeants and make sure that we're keeping things on time, there's so much to talk about and so much energy. We had to expand into a retreat. So lots of good stuff.
Yeah, good problem to have, right?
Absolutely.
That's great. You all are doing such great stuff at USC. It's fantastic to get a sense of it. And we're going to keep the conversation going here in our bonus section of the podcast of Alumless, and that folks can listen to by subscribing. But Chris, do you want to sort of take us to our announcement of our guest in 2 weeks' time?
As long as he doesn't hear this, I'm going to say it. We're going to go to the second best private school currently in the Pac-12, to none other than Howard Wolf from Stanford University as our speaker in 2 weeks from now. He's going to be great. I'll label him as the second best on this call, and then I'll switch it around, Patrick, on the next call. You'll be the second.
I like to refer to Howard as the dean of the Pac-12, and he won't be the dean of the Big Ten when we go to the Big Ten. But I have all kinds of monikers for Howard, but he is a rock star in this industry, and he has, and he and I, by the way, are completely opposite on our feelings on a lot of things, including football.
Fun to have that conversation. Yeah.
Yeah. Including clubs and chapters, a lot of things. But again, we have great respect for each other. And I think it's healthy to have a balance of different perspectives. Yep. So I think you're going to hit a home run with him for sure.
Great.
Fantastic. All right. Well, thank you everybody for listening to Alumless, a web series here on LinkedIn. And we're grateful for Patrick for joining us today. We're going to hop over to a Zoom room, record our bonus segment, and publish the podcast version over the weekend. So thank you everyone for joining us on this Friday. And we'll see you in 2 weeks with Howard Wolf.